everybody. Welcome back to the show. This week, we're going to talk about spiritual protection and discernment. I know that I have shared this before on the show, but I'm going to share with you a personal experience that is pretty recent in my life and how by not listening to my discernment that I began to be affected not only in my mind, my body, but also my spirit. So let's delve into this week's episode. About 7 months ago, I had somebody come to me for a private reading, and in the reading, I thought they were just wanting to connect with their departed loved ones. Well, it turns out they were having a lot of spiritual experiences. They'd gone to other practitioners, were seeking help in understanding some of the poltergeist activity that was happening in their home, some physical attacks that were happening from entities, and then also wanting to really understand their spiritual abilities. So that private reading ended up turning out to be really a spiritual guidance session. And in that session, I was connecting with some entities that were not dead people, that they were from other galaxies, other dimensions. You could call them aliens. I'm not even sure if they were just aliens, but definitely from other galaxies. I know that. And what I saw was this one entity. They looked like they were wearing a gold helmet. Their whole being looked like an alien / some of these space people that you saw in that old cartoon, The Jetsons. But everything about them, their physicality was like very gold, almost like a gold medal that had this incredible sheen on it. And I had said to my spirit guides, I'm not quite feeling like I want to be connecting with these people and figuring out what's going on behalf of my client. My spirit guide said, you can only connect with them for a couple of minutes. That's it. Said, fine. And then I saw this kind of like arm-like limb, if you will, and then extended to it was like this really weird looking thing that I call like a finger, but it was extending almost like a worm, if you will, and it was going inside my client's ear and affecting the brain. So I knew that this entity was definitely in part negatively affecting my client's mind. My client was having definitely some severe mental health issues and some personal challenges that were affecting their ability to work. They weren't even working at this point. And so I gave the communication, I gave the information, I shared the guidance that was coming from spirit. And this client was wanting more support. Now, as a psychic medium, I am here to be of service. I want to help people. This is why I do the work that I do. And underneath that, I felt really on a deep, deep level that I wasn't the person to help them. Or can I say, I knew that I had the abilities to help them, but something on a soul level said I shouldn't. And I did not listen to that voice. It was that small, still voice. And I allowed my desire to help people, to help this person, override that discernment. And that's where everything went wrong. So over the course of 5 months, I began working with this client and trying to support them in understanding their spiritual abilities, helping them set boundaries with the world unseen, clearing their energy, using spiritual protection, using their discernment. Well, at the same time I was working with this client, I was also having a lot of interference from these entities that were connected to my client. They were definitely attachments. And I was trying to balance this while the negative energies, every time that I would work with the client leading up to the day of the session, I would have a chronic pain flare up and mental clarity would be affected. They would be affecting my ability to even put on my spiritual protection. And at this point, I'd never encountered anything like this in my life. They were very powerful and definitely adamant about me not helping my client. So when I realized this, I knew I needed to amp up my spiritual protection. I used the white light, golden light, and the silver light. I was using different crystals, smudging. This was very challenging because they would interfere on all levels to stop me from using any kind of spiritual protection, basically to stop me from helping my client. And there's an incredible book by Suzanne Shumsky, How to Hear the Voice of God. And inside of it, there's some powerful, powerful prayers to cut psychic ties, to get rid of entities, and then also prayers for protection. And I use those on a regular basis. Now, these entities were affecting my mind, that I was having a difficult time recalling those prayers and those specific practices. So I went to go look for my book. And those of you that are watching the video replay, you can see behind me, I've got a big bookshelf with tons of books, and I keep that book on a specific spot. And I kid you not, every time I went to go grab the book, I couldn't find it. These entities were putting like a veil over my eyes, so I couldn't see it. And then I'm calling in my guides, and my guides are doing everything that they can, and we're having some issues. So eventually I found the book, and when I would use the prayers and these exercises, they would affect my ability to be able to read. Like they were hell-bent on stopping me from helping my client. At the same time, I'm informing my client that I'm having interference, and that working with my spirit guides, we had given my client very specific steps that they needed to follow to help improve the situation for them. And then also by doing that, also helping me who's helping that person. And after working with this client for several months, they were not following any of the steps that were very prescriptive, that were very precise from the world of spirit, what they needed to do to cut cords, take their power back, and release these attachments. And it turns out the client was definitely in a state of oppression. Now, oppression is when the entities have a very high degree of control over the person. And I was starting to see physical changes in the person as far as their face and their eyes and stuff. And I was definitely having some deep concerns. And I said to the client, I need you to be able to follow these instructions so we can continue working together. Okay. And the client said that they would, but they never did. At the same time, outside of this instance, these entities were affecting my mind and my body, and they were affecting every area of my life. And so I was going to some people for assistance, and I have a great support system. And one of the modalities that I tried was hypnotherapy. Well, one of the hypnotherapy sessions was so impactful that one of these entities ended up presenting themselves in the hypnotherapy session. And so the reason why I sought out hypnotherapy is I wanted to discover why I didn't listen to my discernment in the first place. Why did I not listen to that small, still voice that said, don't help this person? Leave it alone. Don't touch it. And so when I went into that trance state, we were doing a little bit of parts therapy, right? Which is a therapeutic modality that we were using in the trance state. And this entity stepped forward. Now, in parts therapy, what you're doing is you're connecting with a part of your consciousness that is, and you identify it with a name. That way you can separate it from yourself and identify it, and then find out where the root cause of it came from so you can heal it. Well, what happened to me was not normal. One of the entities that was connected to my client ended up presenting itself while I was in the trance state. Now, when you're in trance state through hypnotherapy, you can come back at any time. I wasn't able to come back at that point until my hypnotherapist had brought me to the end of the exercise. And then through her voice, I was able to come back. And when I was guided to speak this part's voice, the part of my subconscious, it wasn't my subconscious, and intuitively I could feel it, and it gave a name, and it was talking and speaking, and something felt entirely wrong. Now, I want to say up to this point, I'd already done hypnotherapy before and had some interesting experiences, but nothing like this. And so what happened was some things came up that I was so disturbed over. Had nothing to do with me. What this entity did was bring through information that was connected to my client's subconscious and presented it as my own. It put me into a state of like a trauma response, and I didn't know how to cope. Now, this is where having a really good support system is crucial. I connected with a dear friend of mine who's a medium and a psychotherapist, and I explained to them what was happening. And my friend, who's the psychotherapist, had said, number one, as a medium, don't go into hypnotherapy because, and this was their recommendation, because you were so vulnerable. You don't know what they're picking up, because in hypnotherapy, your subconscious mind is picking up every single thing that is happening in your personal life, what you watch on TV, what you listen to on the radio, what you're listening to on a podcast, what you are hearing from other people. And what happened is that my subconscious, because of this entity, was bringing through an experience that my client had shared with me in session, a very traumatic experience that they had, but they brought it through as my own. It was horrific. And I don't want to go into details about what it was about, but what I will say, it was absolutely horrific. I get a hold of the hypnotherapist and I explained to her. She was so wonderful and gracious. She got a hold of me right away because I was in full on fucking panic attack, okay? Like, what is going on? I didn't know that this wasn't my lived experience. I thought this actually happened to me. So I got a hold of the hypnotherapist. I had great support from my friend who's a psychotherapist, but the hypnotherapist had said, this is very, very interesting, Courtney. Do you think there might be some overlap between maybe somebody who you're working with? And she had said to me, number one, she's never had anybody have this response in doing this like 10 or 15 years. And she asked me that question. And I said, I don't know. And then my spirit guide said, Courtney, who did you just work with today? And it was the client who has the negative attachment. And what were you guys working on and talking about? And I said, oh my freaking God, I can't believe this. Normally that stuff does not show up in your subconscious, but because of the attachment, they planted it so deeply that it would affect me in the hypnotherapy, basically to traumatize me and want me to stop working with the client. So at that point, I was so traumatized, I just completely shut myself down energetically. I didn't want to do mediumship. I felt scared. I felt like my spirit guides let me down. I felt like I let myself down. I felt like my spiritual protection didn't work. And I was like, I don't even know if I can do this anymore. In addition to having this like spiritual and emotional trauma, these entities also affected me on a physical level where it was affecting my brain. It was affecting my speech. And I went to my doctor. And of course, some of this stuff you can't tell your Western medical doctors because they don't believe in it. And they might put you in those funny rooms with the white jackets, you know what I mean? And so I ended up saying to her, and I did experience burnout around the same time that I saw my client originally for that first session. And I think in part being burnt out because I was just doing so much, growing my business and a lot of personal things going on, good stuff. But I was just using so much energy and had been really sick last year too, that all of those burnout symptoms, in addition to what I was experiencing with my client, completely caused me a full-on burnout where I just couldn't work. And the burnout was affecting my brain and affecting my speech and affecting my ability to recall, memory, things like that. So I talked to my doctor and we discussed the burnout symptoms, and then she did some tests on me and said, well, I don't think you had a stroke because I had all of the symptoms of a stroke. The numbness of certain limbs, and then also definitely the speech. So I had to wait like months and months and months for a CAT scan, CT scan to check my brain to make sure I hadn't had a stroke. And I didn't have a stroke. And at this point, I'm contemplating, am I even going to continue doing mediumship? Am I going to continue down this spiritual path? Do I want to be vulnerable to this type of stuff? And I stopped meditating, stopped sitting in the power, wasn't doing Reiki, wasn't doing anything. I was like full on traumatized. And I was sitting in my bed one day and I just felt the call I needed to do Reiki on myself. These entities were just so wanting to negatively impact me. They kept saying, it's not going to work. You shouldn't do it. You're going to open yourself up to negative energy. And I got to say at this point, you guys, I never had any of these experiences in my life, nor in any of my mediumistic work. So I finally listened to that small, still voice, which is your discernment, that feeling that lets you know right from wrong, truth from fiction, right? What is right? What is false? And I listened to my discernment and said, no, you're safe. And I did that. And soon as I opened up and allowed that fear to dissipate a bit, my spirit guides came in and gave me some beautiful information and said, Courtney, do the Reiki. I did the Reiki, and I found that when I started to do the healing, I was being shown like a big, massive hook that people would use to like hook a shark or a whale or some massive fish. It lodged in my brain on the right hemisphere of my brain, and the hole was massive, and I could see this like black hole. And it was showing the damage that was done, and then also showing me the hook that was still connected. So when I did the Reiki, the hook was removed, and the Reiki started the healing. And I kid you not, the mental clarity came back. My speech started to improve. A lot of the physical symptoms and emotional symptoms that I was experiencing because of the client and because of these negative entities started to go away. I went and saw my Reiki master and had a session, and this powerful healing helped recalibrate me where my mediumship felt good. I wasn't scared. I took my power back, and I really started doing a deep dive, more shadow work into this inner healing. Number one, how did I let myself get to a place where I burnt myself out and made myself vulnerable? Number two, this healing journey of why didn't I listen to that small, still voice? Even though my heart was in the right place and I wanted to help my client, why didn't I listen? And so going back to my client, I had shared with them, we've worked together like 4 or 5 months. You haven't followed any of the steps. And I gave them a timeline to follow those steps, to start rectifying things. And if they didn't do it, I was no longer going to be able to work with them, and their mentorship contract would be void. And they said, okay, give me a month. I gave them a month. We had one more follow-up call. The person didn't do any of the work. And I said, unfortunately, I'm not able to work with you anymore. And they agreed. Well, long story short, turns out that this client had sought out other practitioners, people that cast spells, do hex removal, saw different types of mediums, practitioners that did different practices involving like bones and stuff, trying to remove these entities from this individual. But all they were doing is giving these entities more strength. Now, I have not been working with this client for like 3 months now. Been doing Reiki, working on my inner healing, and I feel really, really good. I'm still building up my spiritual stamina. I'm still healing, but I am way better. And do I have fear? Absolutely not. This was a huge wake-up call for me to find more balance in my life, but also the significance of spiritual protection. Because 1 month before I started working with this client, my spirit guides had said to me, Courtney, 2024 and 2025 are going to be big, impactful years collectively. And there are more entities and energies that are of a lower vibration and that are negative, that are attacking mediums to stop them from sharing their light. Because I mean, if you're watching this right now, you're definitely spiritually aware. You know what's going on. There's a lot of darkness in the world, but at the same token, there's a lot of light. We can see, if you're watching the news, all of the wars and the catastrophes and the division. And I mean, look at Canadian and American politics and politics in Iran and Gaza and Israel, like everything that's going on. There's so much negative that's going on. And that energy is feeding a lot of these negative energies, these entities. You know, so many of them are non-physical beings. They've never had a physical existence. And so there are so many individuals at the same time that are spreading love, that are spreading light, that are bringing healing. And we are in a spiritual warfare, ladies and gentlemen. We are in a warfare against the darkness. And by using spiritual protection, by using your discernment, by using the power of love, we can combat that, and we have nothing to fear. It is when we don't listen to the voice of our intuition, we don't listen to the voice of our soul and listen to that gut feeling that lets you know something is wrong. Now, when we don't listen to that, that's when we make ourselves vulnerable. And that's exactly what happened in my case. Now, am I scared? No. But I'm very much aware that there is darkness and there is light, and I choose to be in the light. And Spirit had told me that there will be entities that are trying to and are affecting other mediums. So if you're going through something similar, No, number one, you're not alone. Number two, you don't need to be afraid. Three, use your discernment. Your discernment is the number one thing that you need to use for your spiritual protection. It's going to allow you to know right from wrong, fault from fiction, who to trust, who to avoid. Even if something seems really, really good, like it did when I was working with my client, I knew that they were struggling. I knew I had the skill set to help them, but I didn't know all of the other things behind the scenes. And I didn't find that out until shortly after I stopped working with my client. If I had known all of that information, I would have never worked with them. And that was what my discernment was trying to tell me. I didn't need to know all of those details. My discernment was trying to save me and protect me from getting involved with some really dark, dark energy. Okay? Is this typical in our encounters as medium? No. But there will be more experiences that will be trying to impact the collective, that are impacting the collective, in impacting those that are trying to spread love, light, and truth. So, what is spiritual protection? Spiritual protection is what we use as people, as mediums, as intuitives, to honor our sovereignty. You are an energetic sovereign being. Nobody living, discarnate, and being from another galaxy gets to have access to your energy, number one, without your permission. Okay? It's not about being fear-based. It's about saying, I honor myself so much that my energy does not get to be given away freely. People don't get to feed off it whenever they want. Okay? Whether I know them or not, whether they're seen or unseen, nobody gets to just suck my energy without my permission. Actually, nobody should be sucking your energy at all, okay? Even with your permission. But it's about being an energetic sovereign being, number one. It's about taking your power back and recognizing nobody has any more power over your life than you do. And then calling upon that divine protection from source, from God, from the creator, from the universe. And using that can be light, any color of light. For myself, I use white, gold, and silver. Okay, those are colors that I bring through my body and my auric field that cleanse and clear any energies that aren't in alignment with me. Even energies of my own that don't serve me. That light is going to clear it and repel it. It's also going to put on this beautiful protective layer that is going to not allow other energies to come into my field and to come into my orbit, okay? So think of your spiritual protection as like a bubble. It surrounds you. It keeps you safe. It keeps energies that are not of a loving frequency out of your area, out of your field, okay? And then discernment. I grew up in a Christian home and my parents are pretty religious. They didn't believe in psychics or mediums or anything. They didn't really understand the experiences I was having. They didn't know how to support me with that. But one gift my mom helped me cultivate, which was so powerful and I'm so grateful for, was discernment. Discernment is that ability to know right from wrong, if something feels good or if it doesn't. So for example, you might be given a really good job opportunity. The pay is great. You get all the benefits. You get your own office. You get all the perks. There's holidays that you get, like more holidays. You get all of these perks. But something inside says, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. On paper, everything looks good. On the surface, it looks amazing. How couldn't it be true? How couldn't it be good? But something underneath it says, no, something's not right. Don't allow the shiny, the glitz and the glitter to deceive you. Listen to that little voice because it will save you time, frustration. It'll save you health conditions and problems like I've experienced that I'm still recovering from. It will protect you on all levels, friend. And the truth is that there has always been dark and light, negative and love. And we have to stand in our truth and our light and honor it and protect it. And we do this not just with the living people. We do this with spirit people. We do this with all kinds of energy because even living people bless their heart. Some of them are little psychic vampires. They bring you down. They affect you. You ever talk to somebody on the phone and all they do is they talk about their lived experiences, and some of it's like pretty negative and pretty draining. And I mean, you get off the phone and you just feel totally depleted. Do you know your spiritual protection can protect you from that? Did you know by using discernment, you could avoid that conversation altogether? And another thing with spiritual protection is boundaries. Have boundaries. Let people, the living and the other world, know what you are capable of dealing with, what you're willing to deal with, what you want to deal with, and what you won't. Set those boundaries, okay? And I share this with you. Vulnerability is so important in this. This is why I have the podcast, you guys, to let you know that I made a huge error. I didn't listen to my discernment, and it cost me dearly. It affected me. It affected my life, affected my health. My poor husband seeing me and he's like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. And I'm trying to figure it out. Thank God I had a good support system. I got it figured out. And it all could have been avoided if I just listened to my discernment. Trust that voice. That voice is also known sometimes to, in biblical terms, they call it the Holy Spirit. It's that small, still voice that is always going to lead you to truth, always going to lead you to what's right, and it'll always keep you safe. There is a battle, a spiritual battle that's going on, and we need to have our shields up. Do we need to be fearful of it? No. Now, some of you might say, well, Courtney, you didn't use your discernment, but you had your spiritual protection. Why didn't that work? I'm not saying it didn't work, but what I'm saying is that I opened a door. I allowed my client and its entities to come in. So what did that do? That negated that spiritual protection that I put on. And I had to have that removed before that spiritual protection could fully support me. Because remember, there are spiritual laws at place. There are spiritual laws that affect this planet and all galaxies and everybody in it. There is the law of cause and effect. I opened that door unintentionally, but I still did nonetheless, and allow those energies to come in, right? So I have learned a huge lesson, and I'm sharing it with you. And why I'm sharing it with you is to help you, to save you from going through what I experienced. Just because somebody is in need and you have the skill set to help them, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the one who can help them. People also have to become their own saviors. When I worked with this client, they didn't put in the work. They weren't doing the work. And it basically allowed those entities to stay longer and affect me longer. Okay? I had a choice and I didn't listen to that discernment. By that point, I was so impacted that my reason was being affected. But I'm so grateful for spirit support because they helped guide me through that. And I've come out. I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm strong. I'm well. But I'm sharing this story, because as mediums, as healers, as intuitives, as psychics, as mediums, we are doing this work to be of service and to help people. But we can't save the world. People are also responsible for the choices that they make. Just like I was responsible for opening that door by not following my discernment. And I was responsible for removing that energy, for removing the power that those entities had to affect me. Okay? We have responsibility. We can't put that on other people. We can only help people to the degree that they're willing and able to be helped. We can't fix their problems for them. They have to be capable and willing to do the work as well. Okay? So recognize that we have a gift. We are here to heal, but we can't do it all. And sometimes you'll have to say no to somebody. That way you can protect yourself, but also that they can be able to allow a deep level of healing to take place. And sometimes you're not the practitioner. Sometimes they have to do some of that work on their own first before you can help them. Okay? So I really thank you for listening to this really vulnerable episode. I needed to share it with you and also just awaken people that it's not all love and light. It's not. There are adversaries out there, but we don't have to be worried about it. We don't have to be scared of it. But we do need to be diligent in who we interact with, who we allow into our personal space from the living and from the world unseen. And we need to be responsible with how we manage our energy and use our discernment and spiritual protection, right? Now, if you've had a similar experience, I'd love to hear from you. You can let me know in the comments. You can let me know in the show notes. You can let me know by getting a hold of me on socials or in my newsletter, my email. I'd love to hear from you. I'm here to support you every single step of the way. And you know what's the takeaway from this is that nobody has any more power over our life than we do, no matter how dark or heavy the negative is. And we really are always protected. And it's up to us to make sure that we follow and utilize the power of discernment, because it is a gift for a reason, is to help us. And by doing that, we can continue to spread that love and that light and make the impact in the world that we were born to make.